What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, February 11th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Only 4 games tonight. We have like 100 games tomorrow, so these teams are all on the front end of a back-to-back. But 4 games, not too much injury news, but a couple of big pieces that we are still waiting on. One in the 7 p.m. game, and then one on each side of the 7:30 game. Also 4 different lock times, so plenty of room to late swap tonight. I would recommend being around your computer, not necessarily because of injury news, but just because you can take advantage of late swap ability. So should be a pretty fun slate, I think. Couple of games with really big spreads, couple games with tighter spreads. Should be a good one, hopefully at least. So going to walk through game by game, as always, taking a look at my current exposures for DraftKings if the slate started right now. There are a couple of kind of weird spots that I'll mention too, where ownership's a little bit weird because I'm projecting players out that the industry as a whole isn't necessarily projecting out. So that kind of stuff, obviously does get sorted by lock, but it probably threw things off a little bit here in my run. I'm not sure. I haven't actually really looked, but I'll talk about that as I get to it. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get notifications when shows go live. Hit the thumbs up button, comment, all that stuff helps out quite a bit. Now, starting on the Toronto side of the Raptors and the Phillies, or not the Phillies, almost baseball season, but not quite. Raptors and the Sixers. No RJ Barrett again. No Jakob Poeltl again. No Q tags here that are relevant or at all. Grady Dick is probable. Jonathan Mogbo is probable. No PJ Tucker, of course. AJ Lawson in the G League. Who cares? Brandon Ingram is out. Did sign a big contract extension today, but he's out. So I'm assuming that we get a starting lineup here of Emmanuel Quickley, Grady Dick, Agbaji, Scotty Barnes, and Jonathan Mogbo. You have a lot of ownership coming into Emmanuel Quickley. He's getting 33% ownership. I don't really have any issue with that at all. He has seen his minutes ramp up. He played 30 minutes last game. That was not including closing minutes. So there are, potentially more minutes available for him here. This game does have, I believe it's a 9.5 point spread. So there is some blowout risk. But you are seeing minutes ramp up for Quickley. He's a good point per minute guy. I cannot see his salary on the screen right now. There we go. Still $6,100. So relatively inexpensive. No RJ Barrett, does have to compete with Scotty Barnes for touches and for playmaking responsibilities, but no Barrett makes Quickley the clear, second option along with Scotty Barnes. So I think he looks good. Grady Dick at 4,300, shooting guard only, getting 25% ownership, basically because he's cheap and because it is a 4-game slate. So you are going to have relatively limited value options. He's fine. Like, he's a solid point per dollar play. You're obviously not expecting too much out of him. You can see on the screen, I have him projected for 22 DraftKings points at 4,300. That's just going to make him show up in some lineups. But at the same time, it is a reasonable spot. I think if you can find pivots in your large field tournaments, he is one of the more popular guys that I think it's not safe, but like relatively safe to get away from, just because you're less likely, obviously, to get burned by Grady Dick than by a lot of people. Same thing goes here with Agbaji, likely to play around 30 minutes. He's only 4K. Not a great point per minute guy. He's not going to be looked to all that much offensively when you're playing with Emmanuel Quickley and with Scotty Barnes. But there are obviously still shots available. Beyond those two, none of the other 3 are high usage guys between Dick, Agbaji, and Jonathan Mogbo. Scotty Barnes, if you can get to him at 9,200, looks good. Point guard, small forward eligible. There are some other pay up options that I know I'm getting to a little bit more, or at least one of them, but Scotty Barnes looks fine here. Mogbo's still not really getting ownership. He wasn't popular the other day either. He did lose power forward eligibility, which sucks, and he's getting more expensive in terms of actual cost. So I do understand why the ownership is relatively low, but he's likely to give you 28 to 30 minutes here. You basically have had Orlando Robinson playing all of the non-center minutes, all of the non-Mogbo minutes at center so far. Obviously, 1 or 2 of those could trickle over to Chris Boucher or something like that, but you've basically been getting a split between those two, and assuming a relatively competitive game and no massive foul trouble, you're likely getting upper 20s in minutes from Mogbo. Now, you do obviously have very high risk of foul trouble if Joel Embiid ends up playing in this game. That does increase foul risk here. But if all things were to go perfectly, I think you're once again getting like 31 to 32 minutes from Agbo. So projecting him for 29 is, factoring in things that happen over the course of a basketball game. Chris Boucher getting 6% ownership at 4,100. I'm right around the field there. He's fine, probably playing somewhere in like the 16 to 18 minute range. Good point per minute guy. If you do get like bad foul trouble from Agbo, Robinson would be, I think, the first guy that steps up, but then Boucher probably the second guy. So there is, the potential for him to just find his way into more minutes here as well. And then you can see Orlando Robinson showing up in like a lineup at 3,900. He should just get most, if not all, of the backup center minutes behind Magbo, but that doesn't make him project all that good. On the other side for the Sixers, Joel Embiid is questionable. Eric Gordon has been ruled out. Gordon doesn't really have an impact here. He played like 8 or 9 minutes last game. Kyle Lowry's out as well. He played 5 or 6 minutes last game. You have Quentin Grimes now, who is playing a big role off the bench. I projected it to just have like Ricky Council step in and play 10 minutes or something. Jared Butler play like 12 minutes. With those two guys out. So no real ramifications there that matter for DFS. Joel Embiid obviously is the big one. You can see with him in, nothing really looks great from the Sixers. Embiid himself looks pretty good. $10,000 at center in a great matchup against Toronto. Have him projected for 30.5 minutes, factoring in that it is a relatively wide spread, but clearly should, have his way against this Toronto front court. But he cuts into Paul George's production. He cuts into Tyrese Maxey's production. So if he's in, you kind of just get a Sixers team that is basically just secondary plays across the board. Like there's no ownership coming in here with the exception of Embiid. If you take Embiid out, I assume that you're getting Yabusele in the starting lineup playing 30 plus minutes. So he would obviously look better at 6K with power forward eligibility. But more importantly, probably, you're opening the door for more usage for Tyrese Maxey. You're opening the door for more production for Paul George, who has been absolute dog shit this year whenever he's played with Joel Embiid. Probably in part because they just need to figure out how to play together, and Embiid takes months off at a time, so that hasn't happened. But also, you would just expect there to be less opportunities for Paul George when he's playing with Embiid, whereas he is going to look better if Embiid is out. Kelly Oubre is going to look a little bit better if Embiid is out. Everybody, across the board looks at least marginally better if Joel Embiid ends up being out. So that is really big news. Fortunately, it is the first game of the slate. Quentin Grimes, 4,700, shooting guard, small forward. He closed last game. He played like 31 minutes. I have him in for 28.5 here. So I do think there is some wiggle room. Like I think you'll see some games where Grimes plays 31, 32. I think you'll see other games where he plays 25, 26. But that, having that volatility in playing time really isn't a negative when you're talking about large field GPPs and sub 5K bench players. There's not going to be that many guys sub 5K that you can realistically say, oh, well, if he's playing well, he can play 30 plus minutes like you can with Quentin Grimes. So certainly not any sort of a priority, but I don't mind using him to differentiate a little bit. Perfect example of somebody where I'm probably going to have more Grady Dick than Quentin Grimes total. But if you're looking at a specific lineup and you have pretty popular players throughout that lineup, and then you need somebody in this price range, turning a 25% owned Grady Dick into a 3% owned Quentin Grimes in that particular lineup, I think is a perfectly fine way to go. Grimes, projected for like 1 point less than 1 point less than Grady Dick. He's a couple $100 more expensive. So that's why you see that really big gap, is if you're just optimizing and not using range of outcomes very well, you're just going to get Grady Dick every single time over Quentin Grimes, when really they are basically the same play. You're just paying a little bit more for Grimes. So not a whole lot to say here on the Sixers, but obviously Embiid matters a lot. Power asked if I have Bol projected. Yeah, I projected him to play. I doubt that I'm getting them. I actually don't know for sure, but I have him at like, I don't know, 15 minutes, something like that. I still have him in the rotation because I think they've been impressed with the way that he's playing. And it was basically a choice of like, do I give these minutes to Bol? Do I give them to like Vasa Misic? Do I give them to an extra minute to like Ryan Dunn, a couple extra minutes to Ryan Dunn or something. So it wasn't like hard to find minutes for him. I didn't think I was cutting anything important, but yeah, I have him projected, but certainly not to play the 24 or 33 minutes that he has been in recent games. Knicks taking on Indiana. For the Knicks, OG Anunoby is questionable. I projected him out. I know, I think Established the Run has him projected out. Last I looked, Stochastic had him projected in. This is one of the spots that I was referring to where it's going to be tough to, or it could, kind of just throw a wrench into looking at exposures this early in the day, because obviously one of those two things is going to end up being true. And you're either going to have the field projecting him out correctly or projecting him incorrectly once we get that information. So there is the potential, for example, Precious Achiuwa projected for 9% ownership. So that's why I projected him out, Anthony. They said he was going to be out till after the All-Star game, but then he practiced yesterday and they listed him questionable today. So the report wasn't from the Knicks, it was from Shams. So there is some chance he plays today. The Knicks did not say he's not playing, did not officially say that he's not playing until after the All-Star break. But my assumption is that he's probably not playing until after the All-Star break. And then also, if you are going to bring him back before the All-Star break, I assume he's not playing a back-to-back. Maybe he is. It's the Knicks. But I assume he's not playing a back-to-back. So wouldn't it make more sense to just give him the extra day off anyway and bring him back tomorrow if he's only going to play one of the games? So that's my thought process. I think there's a lot of things pointing towards him not playing, and then it would be kind of weird if he does. Also, we'll probably have this news anyway. But, for example, I projected Precious Achiuwa to start. That may not happen either. Miles McBride started the second half last game. So you could you have a couple of moving parts here. One, whether or not Anunoby plays. And then two, does Achiuwa start in his place or does McBride start in his place? Whichever guy starts for him is likely to play a lot of minutes, like mid-30s. Whichever guy comes off the bench is likely to play mid-20s. I went back to Achiuwa here against the front court with, Siakam at the 4. And so at 5,600, 34 minutes, I'm getting to 24%. But if he's confirmed starting, that ownership number is going to come up. And so my exposures will probably come down. So that's one that you can kind of just take with a grain of salt for right now. Cat, I really like here. Again, it is somewhat dependent on Anunoby, because if Anunoby is in, then it is a lot easier for Cat to lose a couple of minutes. He didn't play much against the Celtics. You just got one of those weird Cat games where he played like 27 minutes or something. But in the other two games without Anunoby, he's played like 39 minutes. In the game earlier this year where Josh Hart was out, I don't remember if he ended up playing it or was just on pace to play it and there was a blowout. But either way, he was going to play like 42 minutes. So I think getting Cat to like 37 minutes here is a very reasonable average in, a decent spot, high total for the Knicks. So I like getting the Cat a lot if Anunoby is out. I still think he's fine if Anunoby is in, but I will end up knocking, a minute or two off of his projection. But right now at 9,400, I really, really like getting the Cat. I like getting to Jalen Brunson at 8,400. He picks up a little bit of extra playing time with Anunoby out too. Have him in for 36 minutes here. So I like both of those guys a lot. Josh Hart should play more. He is up to 7,600. You have that triple-double upside with him. You also have somebody that isn't the first option for really anything on his team. So the floor is relatively low for somebody that is 7,600, but the ceiling, I guess, is relatively high given how many minutes he is likely to play. I'm not getting as much as the field right now, but still getting, to 20%, getting to 19% on McBride at 4K. This, again, probably just has to do with the industry as a whole not agreeing on whether or not Anunoby is going to play right now. And so, if Anunoby is in, I have no interest in Miles McBride. I think he would play like 18 to 20 minutes. But if Anunoby's out, you're probably looking at 25, 26 minutes if McBride's coming off the bench, and you're probably looking at mid-30s if he starts, in which case he'll be a lot more popular. So both of these guys, Achiuwa and McBride, I would expect their ownership to go up at least a little bit if Anunoby is confirmed out. Mikal Bridges, 6,300, shooting guard, small forward. Another one, the two wings here, Bridges and Hart, should soak up a lot of minutes if Anunoby is out. One thing I will also say about their rotations last game, they played a really, really tight rotation in that game against the Celtics. Ended up being a blowout loss, but basically they played like 7 guys, and the 7th guy was like Campaign, just playing mostly backup minutes behind Jalen Brunson. I'm not projecting them to do that here. You just kind of see teams sometimes, tighten their rotations, especially good teams, tighten their rotations against like the Celtics, against the Cavs, against OKC. Now you have this matchup with Indiana, and it's the front end of a back-to-back. So I did project the rotation, even if Anunoby is out, to go a little bit deeper. I gave like a half stint to Landry or to Hukporti. I gave Landry Shamet a few minutes, including garbage time or potential garbage time run, but I didn't project it to be quite as appealing a DFS rotation as it was against the Celtics, just because I'd be surprised if they do that in this spot. But there is the potential for them to do it, which would, of course, just make these guys look even better. Campaign showing up a little bit for me at 3,200. That's just a complete last guy in, hope you get lucky in like garbage time or Jalen Brunson gets in foul trouble or, something weird happens. He is 3,200, so it's not like there's a lot of downside risk there. Compared, to the potential ceiling if things really break your way. Michael Henry said, how frequently do I get compared to Max Kellerman? I hadn't heard that in a while, so I laughed when I saw it. Back years ago when I bartended, there were relatively a lot of people that said it. So I have heard that one before. I don't usually get a consistent comparison. There's just like 20 people that people say I kind of look like that, you can kind of see it. Kellerman is one of the more consistent ones that I've gotten though. Indiana on the other side. Miles Turner, questionable. I projected him out too. It kind of just doesn't sound great for him. They said he's not in concussion protocol, but that, he is obviously still questionable. They did sign Jahlil Okafor to a 10-day contract. So kind of just putting pieces together. I projected him out for now, but again, don't know. But this is another spot where I think you just are going to get things looking a little bit different than they will by lock. Getting the 16% Obi Toppin. I'm not really interested in Obi Toppin if Turner plays, but if Turner's out, you're probably getting 22, 23 minutes from Obi Toppin at 4,400. Thomas Bryant, I assume, would start if Turner is out, getting the 13% of him right now, but that ownership number will come up also. One thing to note too, though, where it really gets wonky in this situation, you have to keep in mind that, and I can actually double check this right now, but yeah, so a downside to not having or not, having your own tools that you use. SaberSim right now has Thomas Bryant or has Miles Turner projected in. So they have Thomas Bryant projected as the backup. So they have a lower standard deviation on Thomas Bryant than they'll have if he ends up starting. So if Thomas Bryant is starting, the ownership's coming up, but my exposure at him also will probably come up. So just, I think to simplify it, Thomas Bryant looks good at 5K if he's starting. Thomas Bryant does not look good at 5K if he's not starting. He's played 28, 26, and most recently 23 minutes in his 3 starts without Miles Turner. There is a relatively low floor still, and he's getting more expensive, but he is a good point per minute guy. If he can avoid foul trouble and play relatively well here, he should find his way into mid-20s minutes. Tyrese Halliburton, 8,200, looks fine if you can get there. Nesmith, 3,600 off the bench, probably playing pretty much the non-Benedict Mathurin minutes. That's what we've been seeing in Indiana's rotation so far. It's not a completely strict, one of them on, one of them off, but it's pretty close. So the more minutes Mathurin plays, the worse that is for Nesmith and vice versa. But I have Nesmith in for about 21 and a half minutes. And at 3,600 on a 4-game slate, you're not excited about it, but he's another guy that you can use to just kind of get a lower owned value play compared to like Agbaji or Grady Dick. Both of those guys project better, but when you factor in volatility, Nesmith at low ownership does make some sense. Nembhard at 5,300 looks fine, should give you 29, 30 minutes. Mathurin at 5,200. His playing time is just really volatile. We had seen him limited for a couple of games where he was, by design, playing like 24, 25 minutes. Then we saw him get back up to where he played close to like 30. Last game, it dropped back down. I think you're just going to see volatility in his playing time. I have him in for 26 and a half right now. I think you're really looking at a spot where he could play anywhere from like 24 to 30, depending on how the game goes, how he's playing. At 5,200 and low ownership, that's not a spot that I'm upset about being 2x the field. I think the volatility there is pretty nice. TJ McConnell, I hate this one, but at the same time, large field tournament, 4-game slate. He's 1% owned, whatever. But we have seen TJ McConnell's minutes really cut back lately, giving you 13, 14 minutes per game. He is a really good point per minute guy. I do also have this as a good play type spot for him, which, isn't going to move the needle too much on his projection or anything, but he does operate in the pick and roll a ton. The Knicks do allow the second most pick and roll possessions per game. They also are 5th worst in efficiency on a per possession basis defending it. So if McConnell does just like find his way into minutes, however that may be, he is probably going to be pretty productive here. So, kind of like, I guess, a better sort of version of Cameron Payne where you're not expecting much out of him, but it's hard to find 1% owned guys or 2% owned guys on a 4-game slate that have any semblance of upside whatsoever without, completely saying, well, if these 3 guys ahead of him get hurt, something like that. So at least McConnell's in the rotation. Probably not going to play enough minutes to be a great play, but he is cheap. And if he somehow finds 18 minutes, 19 minutes, he probably ends up being a good play. Pascal Siakam getting a lot of ownership. I'm not really there right now. I don't think he's a bad play or anything. He's just not showing up for me. His playing time is still not where I would really like it to be for somebody at 7,700. He's giving you like 32 minutes, give or take 32, 33 minutes, half him projected for 32 here. So again, he's fine. Like, he's a good player. Obviously he can produce at a high level, but he is at a price point where he's just competing with guys that are going to play more minutes. Halliburton, not necessarily playing that many more minutes, but he's at least, another high upside, relatively highly projected guy in that price range. But like Josh Hart is basically the same salary. He's $100 less. There's a good chance Josh Hart plays like 6+ more minutes than Siakam. You just are going to have plenty of guys you can go to in this range. And so I think it's mostly the ownership that is kind of pushing me away from Siakam. Calvin asks if I have any Millie tickets tomorrow. No, I don't. I had kind of forgotten to be trying for those at all. So I will not be playing that unless I win 100K tonight. Then I'll probably play it, but not planning on playing that. Before we get on to Detroit and Chicago, reminder that you can get access to my projections using the link in the description below. Comes with a 3-day free trial, so that will get you up to the All-Star break for free if you click it today. It gives you access to a spreadsheet that updates as I update my own projections, so you can see what teams I have updated. When injury news breaks, I do my best to note that I'm adjusting a team or that I'm done with it. You can see the minutes that I have projected. You can see their fantasy point projection. I also have a spot in there for live projections on DraftKings. So if you are late swapping, you can see how I'm projecting guys live. So all that stuff's in there. Again, if you sign up now, it is free for you through or until the All-Star break. Alex Len to LA, Lakers. So he was going to the Pacers, then didn't sign there. Now he's with the Lakers. Good choice for him. That seems a lot more fun. Moving on to Detroit at Chicago. Good spot here for the Pistons. The Bulls do not play defense. This game has the closest or second closest, I think, spread on the slate. Just realized that I typed the spread for the Knicks and Pacers wrong in my sheet, I think. Let me double check that now while I'm thinking about it. But yeah, second or tied for second closest spread on the slate. All right, yeah. So good spot here. The Pistons are going to look really, really good. Cade Cunningham showing up 47% of the time. Getting only 19% ownership seems low to me. He's averaging like 37 minutes per game without Jaden Ivey. This game's likely to be relatively competitive. $10,500 price tag, I think, is fine on this slate. So I do like getting to Cunningham a lot. That is probably part of the reason that I'm not getting to as much Embiid as the field was, but this sets up as a really good spot for me for Cunningham. He shows up positively in my play type data too. If that ownership ends up coming up, then, obviously I would expect my exposures come down a little bit, but I really like Cade Cunningham here. I like Jalen Duren a lot at 6,600. He's been consistently playing more minutes as long as he can avoid foul trouble, which he's been doing a better job of, knock on wood. Early in the season was just in foul trouble constantly. And that's why you're seeing the salary still be relatively inexpensive for somebody that produces fantasy points at a rate as high as Jalen Duren is. Early in the season, you were just consistently getting these 21, 22-minute games because he was in foul trouble. And he's been doing a much better job of avoiding that lately. And you're seeing him play, north of 30 minutes when everything goes smoothly. So the upside, I think, for him is really high here. He's getting ownership. I think it's warranted. Asar Thompson getting 27% ownership at 5,100. I'm getting about half of that. I expect him to play around 24 minutes. We have seen that physically he can play up to 30 minutes. He's, gotten games lately where he approaches 30 minutes, but usually in those games, there is somebody out. I think that the Pistons are still happy to limit him to that like 23 to 25 minute range when they are at full strength, which they are tonight, or at least, relatively, not including Jaden Ivey. So I think it's a decent value spot. I just kind of, whenever you have somebody that I think is sort of limited from a playing time standpoint. It's just, how likely is it that they actually burn you? Like, he can give you a good score. Let's say he goes for like 30 fantasy points, right? You'll be happy you played him at 5,100, but you can still probably find other ways around that. It's not like it's a must have if he goes for 30. So at that ownership, I think it's just a spot where I'm playing him some, but there's also going to be a lot of lineups where I just have popular players and it's like, okay, let me find somebody that isn't getting 25% ownership that still has the same range of outcomes as a Star Thompson. And I don't think it's going to be that difficult to find. Tobias Harris averaging 34 minutes per game without Ivy. Price tag at 5,900, looks fine. Not a great point per minute guy, but not terrible either. Not the most exciting guy to roster. Just probably, a nice like last guy in if you're thinking about it in terms of like hand building. Tim Hardaway giving you around 30 minutes per game. Shooting guard, small forward is nice. 4K is nice. Tim Hardaway's fantasy production is not nice, but that's why he's 4K. Malik Beasley at 5,500, shooting guard, small forward, likely to give you about around 25, 26 minutes off the bench. Has been shooting well lately. Does have a good matchup here. The Bulls are allowing the second most three-point attempts per game this season. They do not play defense. They're allowing the second most points in general per game this season. It's a good spot for Beasley. Obviously you need him to knock down those shots, but he can play his way into some more playing time. I do like that he's only 6% owned. This is somebody where if he's popular, I would just kind of run the other direction because he is going to basically just need to make shots. He's not going to do a lot other than knock down threes. So there is that volatility there. There's a pretty low floor, but there's also a pretty high ceiling. We have seen it lately. Granted, you can ignore that huge game against Philly. That was the game where he played 38 minutes with no Cade Cunningham, but still, a nice matchup for him to come in and get some open looks. Isaiah Stewart should just play all of the non-garbage time minutes behind Jalen Duren. He's 3,400, so he's in that bucket with like Cam Payne, where the upside is there. He just has to find the minutes. He is a little bit more likely to find those minutes than Payne because obviously Jalen Duren is more likely to get in foul trouble than Jalen Brunson. But the downside is that the opportunity cost is also higher because of the center position. Anthony said, I used Run the Sims for the Super Bowl and liked it. You guys work with them for NBA too. So we own them. We bought them. That became official like last week. Yuta, Brick, Nerdy, and me. We bought them. So that is us now. We do not have Sims for NBA. We won't for at least the foreseeable future. It's just way more time consuming than we want to prioritize, given that right now it's essentially the four of us. And what goes into maintaining an NBA sim and all of that is not in the cards right now. That's something that, if we added it, it'll be down the road if the site does get big and we hire people and all of that. But our focus right now is on improving the NFL product, which we already think is good. I use the Showdown tool also. I enjoyed it. I think it's good. But we have some ideas to improve that. We're going to improve the main slate NFL tool as well. And then we're going to be rolling out some other stuff in between now and NFL season that I can't go into detail on yet, but stuff that we just think is going to be good. So our thought process right now with the four of us is basically we're not going to be the site that you come to and you can get every sport, you can get projections for everything, all of that, one-stop shop type thing. We're not looking to do that because it's just more than we can do, but we want to actually put out tools that we think are really good and that we can really stand behind and that we really believe in and that we think add value compared to what is currently publicly available. So the trade-off to that is that we can't focus on building like 8 different things at once because we're working on making 1 or 2 things at a time really, really good. So NFL, the really big focus for us, but we will also have some stuff rolling out between now and then. No NBA in the immediate future though, because that would just be a massive undertaking for the four of us. On the Chicago side, plenty to like here as well. This game in general just looks very, very good. Buzelis getting 25% ownership at 4,800. I'm at 31%. I'm assuming that he remains in the starting lineup with Lonzo Ball out. He's played 29 minutes in each of his starts. He lost garbage time last game too, though. So I do think that there is a path to him playing more than 30 minutes and possibly considerably more than 30 minutes. He, against Golden State, a game that the Bulls got killed, Buzelis played 29 minutes. He subbed out with almost 4 minutes left in that game. So I do think that there is upside for a little bit more. I have him in for 30 here. And so I am getting to a lot of him at 4,800. I am getting the 25% Kobe White, 25% Vucevic, 24% to Sunmu. Those guys all, between 17 and 33% owned. They just are likely to play low to mid 30s in a nice matchup. Obviously, no Zach LaVine. And unlike, when you think about the Kings where LaVine went, you take out the Aaron Fox, but you're replacing him with Zach LaVine. So you don't necessarily get a huge bump for any of the guys on the team. For the Bulls, they didn't backfill Zach LaVine. They turned Zach LaVine basically into Buzelis, who, while he is a solid fantasy producer, is not taking possessions away from Kobe White or, Dosunmu or Josh Giddey the way that Zach LaVine does. So you do get better opportunities, more opportunities for guys like Kobe White, Vucevic, Dosunmu, Giddey, and the playing time is there for them as well. So I like all of those guys. I like getting to Jalen Smith here. I saw Dangerous Dave in chat say Duren and Jalen Smith might be his favorite plays of the slate. There are two guys that I'm getting a lot of. I would frame the way that I talk about them very differently. I'm happy to be getting to Jalen Duren. I understand and can tolerate why I'm getting to Jalen Smith. But Jalen Smith should play all of the non-Vooch minutes, and that includes garbage time, most likely. In the last game, that Golden State game, you ended up getting 28.9 minutes from Vooch. You got 19.1 minutes from Jalen Smith. He came in, played garbage time. He played every, normal rotation minute that Vooch wasn't on the floor. And that's generally what you're going to see from him. So on average, you're expecting around 16 minutes, given that I have Vooch projected for 32. But if Vooch gets in foul trouble, it's more Jalen Smith. If the game blows out, it's probably more Jalen Smith. If the Pistons are up by 15 and the second unit gets hot and they just stay on the floor longer, it's more Jalen Smith. He's a good point per minute guy. He's one of these guys that you just need to find the minutes. And, you can see here that even in 16 minutes, I have him projected for 20 DraftKings points at 3,700. So it's a good point per minute projection just in his normal role. And if he plays more, then it's not like it's that far-fetched to where he gets somebody that you really want to have, especially on a 4-game slate at only 10% ownership. I like Josh Giddey here. I'm getting 21% of him at 7,300, 14% ownership. So this is probably some of the Pascal Siakam, where I'm playing Giddey at a rate closer to where the field's playing Siakam. And I think part of that too probably just has to do with how much I like this game. Something that doesn't get talked about very often in NBA DFS because it's not nearly as important as it is in MLB or NFL or NHL, you do still have correlation here. And so, not that I wasn't playing guys from the Knicks and Indiana game, but the more that I'm getting to Kobe White and Vooch and Dosunmu and Cunningham and Harris and these guys that rely on this being a competitive game so they can maximize their minutes, that is beneficial for Josh Giddey as well. I think a lot of times people think about the negative correlation component in NBA DFS, and I think it's more important to think about, if the game goes in a way that you're maximizing playing time for White and Vooch and Dosunmu, you're probably maximizing those minutes for Josh Giddey too. And, for Cade Cunningham and for the guy, the starters on the other side. Similarly, there's not a great example here, but I'm actually curious how much of my Jalen Smith has Kevin Huerter. So nothing, too crazy there. But a lot of times what you will see in my lineups is where I do have, again, it's not a great example here with Jalen Smith because he just needs Vooch to get in foul trouble. But if I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but let's say I was getting to a lot of Kevin Huerter, maybe I would want a lot of Patrick Williams too. Or with Indiana, if I'm getting to a lot of Obi Toppin, maybe I want a lot of Aaron Nesmith, second unit guys that play together. And if the second unit gets more playing time for one reason or another, they all benefit. So, that's something that I think doesn't really get talked about too much in NBA DFS. I know Yuta's talked about it in videos that we've done together at Endgame, talking about the same thing I'm just talking about. But on a 4-game slate, that does also become more important to consider because your opportunity cost is just going to be lower because you have less other options. On a 10-game slate, I don't really care that much about, and this is why it doesn't get talked about. I don't care that much about correlation because it's not changing people's projections that much. Me having Kobe White isn't bumping Josh Giddey's projection that much to where on a 10-game slate, I'm then prioritizing him over guys that project, 5 points better in his price range or whatever. But on a 4-game slate, that's not the case. And so I do think that it kind of goes hand in hand that I'm just getting to all of this game because liking a few pieces of this game a lot is just pulling up everybody else as well. Kevin Huerter showing up a little bit for me at 3,400. He did play 19 minutes last game, and that was not garbage time. He looks like he just has a real bench role here with the Bulls, at least for the time being, while Lonzo is out. I don't really see any reason why that would change. I'm not anticipating Dallin Terry playing ahead of him or anything like that based on what we've seen. So I do think Huerter makes some sense, especially at basically no ownership. Patrick Williams showing up 9% for me, 15% for the field, 4,200. Playing time's volatile for him. Only played 19 minutes last game. Did close the first half. You, on average, I think, see around 24 minutes from him. But if he's playing well, or Buzelis is in foul trouble, or Buzelis is playing poorly, you certainly could get some more playing time for Williams also. Steve asked if I'm going to do these shows for MLB this year. Yeah, most likely. I don't see any reason that I wouldn't. I don't have anything better to do at 5 p.m. usually, or 4 p.m., whatever time I start this. So yeah, most likely. Moving to the last game, Memphis taking on Phoenix. Interesting ownership coming into pieces of Memphis that I did not expect to be getting ownership and did not expect to be getting to, but at their salaries, I guess it does make sense here. You do have a very high team total for Memphis as well, highest on the slate, but Santi Aldama getting 13% ownership here at 4,600. Vince Williams getting 23% at 3,100. I only have Vince Williams in for 15 minutes. He could pick up more minutes. I don't know how quickly they're looking to ramp him up. They obviously don't need to be aggressive with him. They have 800 good players in their rotation right now. Nobody on this team really is hurt. So I have him in for 15 minutes. That gets him like a 14.5 fantasy point projection. But at 3,100, it does still get him into lineups. And you can see that the field is getting to him as well. Santi Aldama should give you 22 minutes on average, but he's capable of playing 24, 25 if he's playing well. 4,600 for him looks fine. Again, I don't love that I'm getting 28%, but at the same time, I do understand it, especially when you go back and you think about, I wasn't getting to as much Agbaji. I wasn't getting to as much Grady Dick. It's just, I do need to go somewhere. And so Aldama appears to be where I'm getting to. GG Jackson, 3,900, same kind of thing. Played 20 minutes last game, including garbage time. I got him to 19 minutes here. I think his range of playing time is pretty volatile, but he's a really, really good point per minute guy. So you're just hoping that, he maximizes the time that he is on the floor. Then you get to some good players that I'm not getting as much of. Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Ja Morant. I think the reason I'm not getting as much of them, I'm not really surprised. I'm a little bit lower on their minutes than the industry appears to be in general. I don't love it, but I also don't feel strongly enough that I'm wrong that I'm going to change it. And the reason is they played like real minutes against OKC last game. Ja played like 36. I don't think, and I will change this opinion pretty quickly if it ends up looking like I'm wrong, but just based on how Taylor Jenkins typically coaches and what we've seen this season in general, I don't think you're just going to consistently get tightened rotations from Memphis to where you're getting huge minutes from these guys. I think it's more likely that was just they were playing OKC. They took that game very seriously. They wanted to play their guys big minutes. Now you get them on the front end of a back-to-back in a game that, isn't the same marquee matchup against OKC. And I'm back to projecting them to be normal, 30 minutes for Morant, 31 minutes for Jackson, 31 and a half for Bane. So, I think maybe I'm a little low. Like I could see adding like a half minute or something, but at the same time, I think that's why I'm not getting as much as the field is. I think I'm just a little bit lower on minutes projections here than the field is. I don't have any problem with Jackson, Bane, Morant if you're getting to them. They all look pretty good. I am getting quite a bit more Jalen Brunson, for example, than Morant, partly because of Anunoby, or partly because I'm projecting Anunoby out. So I do have that extra minute or two on Brunson. But, that's kind of the issue that I think I'm running into is like Brunson is getting more ownership by a lot. So I think Morant is a solid pivot, but I also just have like 6 more minutes going to Brunson right now. So it's going to be tough for me to be like prioritizing Morant or prioritizing Bane. But all of those guys I think are fine if you just have lineups where they fit, you want to get to them. I just am a little concerned about, Memphis basically being fully healthy and knowing the way that Taylor Jenkins tends to run his rotations. Jalen Wells, 3,500, really cheap, does lose playing time with everybody being back, likely to give you around, 21 minutes or so. Brandon Clark, center only, 3,600. It's another backup center where, he's fine. Should give you like 18 to 20 minutes. Yeah, Arcathelza like could be right. It is a nationally televised game. It is a marquee matchup in the sense that they're facing Booker and Durant. It's not a marquee matchup in the sense that the Suns matter at all. So like, yeah, you could see them. You could see them play more minutes, but I'm just not really confident in it, especially on the front end of the back-to-back. But again, like maybe they just go balls to the wall tonight and then they just rest all these guys tomorrow. Like they could easily do that as well. Tomorrow they play at the Clippers. So, not necessarily I was, if they're playing like the Jazz or something, then I think you could like logically say, well, maybe they just play this for real and then tomorrow they rest. There's no real reason that they would rather play the Suns, like take the Suns more seriously than the Clippers, I don't think. But you certainly can make that case. Maybe they just play really aggressively here and then tomorrow they just rest everybody. That could happen. So I think, from a ceiling standpoint, they look fine. They're just not guys that I am particularly getting to, at least right now. Wouldn't be upset if I started getting to more of them, though. And then finally, wrapping things up with Phoenix, we do have Kevin Durant back. We still do not have Bradley Beal. I am getting a lot of Tyus Jones, which I'm a little bit surprised by. At the same time, I guess I shouldn't be. Like, he's still sub 5K. He plays more minutes without Bradley Beal. He's averaging 31 minutes per game in the games that he's played with Booker and Durant with no Beal. I have him at 29 and a half minutes here. I did cut his projection a little bit just because there's no guarantee that he closes with the current version of the Suns and then also going against a bigger Memphis team. You, I think, have a pretty good chance of getting closing lineups that have Booker at point guard. So it's like Booker, O'Neal, Allen, Durant, center, or Booker, Dunn, O'Neal, Allen, Durant, something like that. So there's no guarantee that Tyus Jones closes this game, but I do think you still see more minutes than, if Bradley Beal were also in, where he gets kicked back to like 24, 25 minutes. So he's getting 24% ownership. I'm a little bit higher than that at 4,800. KD getting 22% at 9K. I'm a little below the field there, but still, it's Kevin Durant. If you get to him, great. 5K Royce O'Neal. I'm assuming he stays in the starting lineup. That's not set in stone, but it's my guess. Have him in for 29 minutes. Grayson Allen's getting 41% ownership at 4,900. I don't get that one. If he starts, obviously I'll project him for more minutes. Right now I have him at 26. I think maybe I end up getting that up to like 27. Obviously he does have a path to playing a lot of minutes. I just don't really know what separates him from like a bunch of other plays on this slate. So I do think I'm a little light on his projection right now. I will end up increasing that, but I still think if he's 41% owned, I probably just find some other spots to go to, including like Tyus Jones, even though it's a different position. Nick Richards, 5,100. He's really interesting to me just because at some point you would think he starts playing more minutes, but Budenholzer has been very, very stubborn with Mason Plumlee this year. He's been at times closing over Nick Richards. He did it the other day down the stretch against, I want to say Utah. But I could be completely wrong there. But after the game, he was asked about it, and he basically gave some bullshit answer like, oh, well, my gut said to play Plumlee. Like, for whatever reason, he's just refusing to understand that Mason Plumlee is horrible. Not saying that I think Nick Richards is great or anything, but like at some point, you would think he comes to his senses and starts playing Nick Richards more. And it would be really nice to have 4% owned Nick Richards when that happens. But there's also no real indication that that is going to happen. He's averaging 22 minutes per game in his starts with Mason Plumlee. There's been no indication that's changing. So, that's kind of how you have to project him. But I like the idea of it. Similarly to, I like the idea of Goga last night, which went horribly and didn't work. Devin Booker, 9,500. I think this is another just function of how much Cade I'm getting to. If I were to start getting less Cade, I think I start getting more of Booker. But, you do have Durant back. You have a pretty expensive price tag on him. You do have a very fast-paced matchup against Memphis, which is nice. But right now, to me, Cade's just the bigger priority. Bol, 4,300. I mentioned him earlier. I have him in for 14 minutes. Probably won't end up with him. But another team that, looks pretty appealing. I think for me, Tyus Jones right now looks like the best play for the field. Apparently, it looks like Grayson Allen. So we'll see. Again, I do think I'm a little low on Grayson Allen here, but still have a hard time picturing 4,100. Somebody had asked earlier, Cam asked earlier, do I have a favorite small forward besides Grayson Allen and Thompson? See who I'm getting to. So I think I'm pretty spread out. So most of the forward spots are power forwards. Kobe White at small forward is interesting. So I guess the answer is no. Like there weren't really any that stood out that I thought were great. Mike said, "What's the closest thing to FC since the site is fucked again?" Downloaded Solver. Do you have any recommendations for similar optimizers? I honestly have no idea. Solver is what I was going to say, with the caveat that I have never used it. I do know that last time FC went down, Yuta still uses FC. So last time it went down, he switched over to Solver. He was happy with it. So that would be my recommendation based on what he had to say, not based on my own experience because I have never tried it. But yeah, that's what I would switch to if you're just looking for an optimizer and FC's down. So that wraps this one up. Thank you for checking out the show. I will try and do a show tomorrow. No promises on that because there are a million games, and I assume there's going to be a ton of injuries and stuff that I have to deal with injury wise. But I'll do my best to have my stuff done in time to do the show. Otherwise, this might be the last one before the break. I forgot that I'm doing Lowell's with Brick on Thursday, so I probably won't be back Thursday. So just subscribe to the channel so you get notifications when I post the show. I'll do my best to have one tomorrow. I can't promise it. But either way, thanks for checking out the show. Subscribe to Endgame if you want our videos on just being better at DFS. Subscribe to Run the Sims. I didn't mention that earlier. We did talk about it, but you still can sign up 10% off using promo code Endgame, 10% off for life if you sign up now. We do have the annual NFL package available, so obviously you won't be able to use it for a while, but you will be locked in to that price. If you are planning on using it in the offseason, you'll get a better deal on it now. And then you can get my NBA projections in the description as well. Neil said, loving the non-promises. Yeah, I mean, I know my limitations. There's been plenty of times that I say, yeah, I'll be back tomorrow, and then it doesn't happen. So I'm just going to be straight up and say I have no idea if this is happening tomorrow or Thursday, but I'll do my best. So thanks for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. If I don't end up doing another show between now and the All-Star break, enjoy your break. There's no NHL to lose money on, so enjoy being incredibly bored, and I'll see you back whenever I do another show.